Okay, Bisley, you have the com.
What'd you say?
You have the controls.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you, Marty. I will text you when we're done.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Okay, we're going to wait for probably just a minute or two to see who else might join. Would be awesome.
I did get an email from Stony that she might just be a couple minutes late. But other than Stony, we are all here. Kathy just said she had an emergency phone call real quick. So, but hopefully that'll just take another second.
Cool. So let's give it a few minutes, see if we can get Kathy and Stony and the rest of us. If anybody wants to grab water or take care of any business, we'll wait just a couple minutes.
Oh, everyone, I apologize. Oh, I'm only 3 minutes late.
We're all good.
Oh,
we're all good. We're
for
just waiting
Peter
to see
as
if
well.
Stony shows up. No, I'm here.
Oh, you are there. Sorry, Peter.
Hi, all good.
And Marty, Greg, can you turn on your camera?
Marty might be gone already. She just
Mine?
started the meeting for us.
Yeah, hang on, working on things.
Okay, that's why I couldn't hear anyone. I apologize. Are we ready to go, Paisley?
Yes, Joe will not be with us. Stony might emailed and said she will be a minute or two late. And I don't believe Marty is with us anymore. She just set up the call. And I will most likely turn off my video just while taking minutes so you don't see my double chin while I do that.
Peter, if it's all right with you, I will call the meeting to order and go over our typical public announcements as far as anyone who is attending or would like to attend the meeting. For those, the public who would like to attend by phone, the cell phone users, phone numbers are 253-215-8782, 213-338-8477, 267-831-0333. We also have 4 toll-free numbers, 833-548-0282, 877-853-5257, 888-475-4499, and finally 833-548-0276. Webinar ID is 869-2489-9859 with the passcode 574069. With that being said, I would like to call for any public comment. And hearing none, I would like to hand the meeting over to Peter Lambros, who is going to facilitate our 2021 planning meeting with thanks and appreciation. I think most of you know Peter had been on the Public Art Committee for quite a long time and was chair for probably close to 4 years. So he graciously accepted the opportunity to facilitate our meeting. So look forward to everybody's involvement. So thank you. Thanks all for being here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Peter, and if at any point in time I'm not audible or my screen's not sharing what I think it is, please cut me off or jump in and help me to put my best foot forward. I do have a history with this committee, so I share in common with you a joy of the mission. And when asked to be part of today, I was excited just because I care deeply about the work and love Missoula and love the mission of the Public Art Committee. So thanks for having me. I am not by any training a formal strategic planner, but through life experience, I think I can participate and help direct today's meeting to produce some fruit. And so I'm going to wing it a little bit, but I've got some notes and an agenda on things that I think might inspire some good conversations. So that's what I'm going to try to do with you today. One of the things I'm really biased towards meeting in person, and I wish dearly that we were all in the same room and so we could be animated and talk and whiteboard and all that stuff. And I've had to adjust my thinking to be like, okay, we're going to do this today on Zoom. But to make it dynamic, I'm going to do my best to ask questions and ask specific people questions and ask questions that I ask everybody to take a minute and answer as a way to bring us together and to make this feel as personal as possible. So the first question I have for you today, I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how I think we can best use our time today. But before I jump into my ideas, even though we've got an agenda, pulse on, here's what I hope comes from today. It's not a mandatory, you don't have to do this, but anybody who can, in the webinar format, I assume we can all participate and join, and let me know if there's any problem with audio. But can a few of you jump in and just tell me some hopes you have for today? Kathy, as chair, what do you hope comes of today?
I was just unmuted myself. You know, what I would like to see is, and here are everyone's thoughts on protecting the stability of the committee. And, you know, I really, we haven't looked at short, medium, and long-term goals in a few years. So I'd love to hear, because everybody has amazing ideas. I'd love to hear everyone's ideas on both project ideas for short, medium, and long-term goals, committee stability, I guess. And that's a variety of things for short, medium, and long-term, and public art in general in Missoula, short, medium, long-term goals, and goals that, you know, whether they're WAGs or, you know, small, medium, large, it really doesn't matter. I think I think people have excellent ideas. So it'll be fun to get that organized and get it on paper.
Okay, great. Who else has some kind of hopes for today?
Peter, I'll jump in and just say that this is my third meeting with the group. I'm a freshman. I just want to get a better grasp on where we're at, where we're headed, and I guess how I can be helpful. I've had some good ideas that just haven't like fruited, but like I said, still a youngin' here. So
awesome. Okay, cool. All right. Anyone else want to jump in with anything before I move into some more questions?
I was just going to add that I think if we end up getting more funding to hire a part-time position to support the art committee, kind of what those roles and responsibilities and I guess strategies to meet whatever short-term, long-term goals we end up getting out of our meeting.
Right. Okay, cool. And I'm kind of noting on the whiteboard that I'm going to make forward facing in a few minutes. So I'm taking some notes as we go along, but that's great. Okay, great. Anyone else before I move on to another question?
I would say maybe maybe focusing the committee towards community feedback, and could come in a couple of different forms, but getting more engagement with the community, being able to lift more voices up out of the community through this medium, and really acting on the reflection of what the community demands are. I would say that would be a good point.
Hey, Peter, I'm having trouble hearing you at the moment.
Thank you so much. Okay. When I was on the committee, one of the things that I always found really cool is just how diverse we were. We all came to the committee with our own unique skill set. One of the things I'm going to talk about when we get into the mechanics of how does a committee like this get something done is really, it's possible because of the individual traits and strengths that we may bring. So I'm going to take a moment for what I hope is a mandatory question, and that's for everybody to introduce me to you but in a boastful sense. I want to know something that you're really proud of that you've accomplished in life, either on a committee or an adventure or overcoming something, just something that you're proud of, and a skill set that you took away from some life experience you have. It could be anything: a great meal that you cooked, a goal that you accomplished at work, or something that you achieved educationally or as an artist. I don't care what it is, but I'd like each of you, and I'll call on people so we don't have this awkward thing of like who's about to go, and I'm just going to go across my list. So James, tell me why you're a rock star.
So my name's James Walter. I am a business owner operator here in Missoula. I've been metal fabricating and blacksmithing for almost 20 years, and I really enjoy finer architectural features, whether they be in wood, metal, stucco, and often am curious about that intersection of architecture and art, understanding that they're two different things, but realizing that, our community is built out of both of those elements, or as being two primary elements, and it's something that we live with, and something that really affects people's lives on a day-to-day basis. Can you hear me? So what I would say about my work outside of my professional business is that working with the bike ped board. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, James.
So
I can hear you, James. I often can't hear Peter.
Sorry about that. There's heavy equipment outside and kids, and I would I would say, or in the experience of working with the bike ped board, I've learned that, you know, volunteering yourself and giving time to the community is often limited in what you get back. It can be taxing personally, and I really have just come to find so much peace and satisfaction in just getting a product or an idea or something to that state of completion, no matter what it takes. For me as a personal individual, what I'm willing to give, and the satisfaction that comes, and in the return of knowing that that change can be made. Some things, no matter how small they are, that the satisfaction that comes from doing something rather insignificant can be rather large. And so that's been my real meaningful experience working with the city. So that would just be the one note.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Thank you. Heidi, why are you a rock star? Tell us something about you.
All right. I'm Heidi West. I think the thing I'm most proud of is my house. I started designing it out of cereal boxes, and then we finally moved in, I guess, last 2 Mays ago now, and we've been finishing it ever since. So it's been pretty exciting. I've got handmade tiles in my shower, and yeah, we pretty much built the whole thing. So you can see the front door.
So that's what we're looking at behind you.
Yeah. Yep.
I was going to say, it has that look of a place that feels like it's a cabin somewhere. And I was like, God, I wish I was where Heidi is. So that looks awesome.
I'm just on the north side, although you're welcome to come join me on my porch.
Yeah. All right. Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Lisa, why are you a rock star?
That's a hard one. I think that I think a quality that I have that comes through in a lot of what I do is that I'm pretty tenacious, and I think that has a little to do with the arc of my career, which I started by enlisting in the Navy when I was 17. Forged my father's signature, kind of in the words of Edna St. Vincent Millay, there ain't a train I wouldn't take. And then went on to get a PhD in English literature. And so that arc of just being very tenacious and being willing to like go for things that people don't think that you can do is part of who I am. And now I own an art gallery, neither using my military training or my PhD, but I can still float on my pants as I was taught in the military. And I do use my PhD quite a lot as an art gallery owner. But I think those two things together spell like being able to just set your mind on something and working your way through it, and thinking really hard about steps that you take. I think that's what
awesome.
Those two things do.
That's
so
what
cool. I could come
awesome.
up with 30 seconds notes.
That's what it's all about. Thanks for sharing that. Kathy, I already know you're a rock star, but remind us why, something that you're proud of.
Oh, I wanted to be last. No, actually, like Lisa, I am pretty excited and proud of my varied career, from being in the museum world, curatorial directorship, to starting my own businesses, helping start businesses, to the tune of 155 around the country, and my community involvement. I mean, throughout my career, I've always been on a number of boards and willing to give to the nth degree, of which public art has been there for a while, and very proud of my participation here. And that's it. And I've
Awesome.
lost you,
Thanks,
Pete.
Kath.
I've lost you. Yeah.
All right, cool. Dennis, would you share with us something about you that you're proud of and that we can know about you?
Yeah. I had to get the audio.
And please mute, if you're not talking, please mute. Thanks.
Okay. Gosh, I don't know about a rock star, but one thing I was just thinking when you were saying that was back in the day, I was first of all, I'm an artist, and back in the day, in 74, I started my own business called Sapphire Stained Glass. I don't know if anybody here was there then or would remember anything about it. It was on the corner of Orange Street and Front, on that very corner there, and we had a big stained glass studio and then a woodworking shop in the back, and just did a lot of work all over town. I was in California for a while, working on the working for the Lucasfilm company. I've done a lot of stained glass restoration. I went back and got my degree in architecture, so I'm also an architect.
I'm going to pause you for just a moment. Is everybody else able to hear? Dennis, you bleeped out on me for a minute. Can everybody else hear, or did Dennis bleep out for a sec?
No, I definitely heard Lucasfilm in there. Got
I heard
me.
it too.
Is the video not
Dennis,
coming through?
No, your video is fine. I think we just lost you for audio for a minute. So, and I might just jump in if I ever lose track of you guys to make sure that we're still engaged with the audio. But I lost you just about 2 sentences ago when you were talking about the stained glass past of yours. So if you could just make sure you're close to your mic source and jump back in, we're hearing you now.
Okay, so I also went back and got my degree in architecture, and so I'm also an architect. And so I kind of have that combination of art and architecture that I think could be very helpful to the committee. I was on the design review board for a number of years, and had that experience working with the city in that respect. As an architect, I worked with the city quite a bit on getting plans through city planning, and work with the county as well on that. And yeah, just have a lot, I think, that I can, with my experiences and such as a businessman, artist, and architect, then I can add a lot to the committee, and I'm very excited about the possibilities, and think we have a lot of exciting projects coming up, and hopefully many more. So glad to be
Awesome.
around.
Thanks. That's awesome. That's exciting. Danny, I'd love to hear from you about something that you're proud of, or something that means a lot to you about yourself.
Oh gosh, I have been thinking this whole time, and I'm struggling. Also, hello, I'm Danny. I'm Danielle Vasquez. Everyone calls me Danny. I guess what I'm most proud of. Well, I got a really fancy camera today. So I'm going to be starting this documentary that I've been talking about for the past couple of years. Just because I think with filmmaking and like art, I think it's like important that I'm native. I'm Chippewa Cree. I'm from Rocky Boy, and as a person of color, as an Indigenous person, I think it's important that we tell our own stories. You know, and you know that looks like a lot of different things. Like I said, it could be film, it could be art. Because for a long time, you know, our stories weren't our own. You know, it was told through the colonizer's perspective. And so, yeah, it's kind of reclaiming that narrative, which is kind of why I was like drawn to the Public Art Committee at the beginning. Just because, yeah, I was walking downtown and just kind of realized that there wasn't any like murals that kind of represent the history of this land, or, you know, not even just the history, just like contemporary Indigenous experiences. So, yeah.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Greg, you're on.
Unmute. Great. Well, I am a local rock star. I play bass in a band called VTO. Maybe you've never heard of us. Anyways, I think that the thing that I'm most recently excited about is I just finished shooting and producing a music video for Jeff Ament that was his most recent single that just got released last Thursday. That was cool. That all happened here in town on campus. Lots of green screen and special effects. And that would segue into what my jam is. I'm a digital artist. I also sculpt, I paint, I build, I cook, I raise children. I am, today's Renaissance artist. I'm a professor at the university in this School of Visual and Media Arts, and my world is animation, digital illustration and design, and interactive art. Did I fit 30 seconds in there?
Yeah, and you really pushed the rock star buttons more literally than many of us are able to. So that's awesome to hear about your own music path and rocking out with a rock star. I know Jeff, and that's pretty cool. Stony, I've had the good fortune of working with you, and I already know you're a rock star too, but would love to hear it in your own words.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, guys. Nice to see you. It's been a while. I have been on vacation conveniently for our last few meetings. I didn't do that intentionally. It's interesting. It's kind of a funny thing, this question. I feel pretty uncomfortable by it, but I did a studio visit with one of our artists. So about 3 years ago, I started a nonprofit and worked together with many different community partners to put artists at unique locations around Western Montana. And it's been quite the ride. It's been really exciting. This year we have like 25 artists from across the states at all sorts of different locations. And I was just sitting down with one of them yesterday for a studio visit at the Missoula Public Library. And she actually has an artist talk coming up tomorrow evening if anybody's interested. But she's a designer, and we had this long conversation about empathy and design and just a lot of really interesting questions. And, at one point in time, she said, "Stony, I'm here because of you." Like, she's like, this is my first time I've ever had real time to devote to my practice and to really give myself this time. And I'm here because of you. And she was like, it gave me goosebumps. And it was really, sometimes when it's like you're trying to raise the money or you're trying to work through all the logistics or, all of the stuff that goes along with it, it's really those moments that feel really satisfying of like, okay, the whole the whole thing that gets me up in the morning is happening. And that feels really resonant and really good. And I don't know about this rock star business, but it does feel empowering and affirming. So thanks.
That's so cool. And when you can see your personal something that you've sent out there come back that concretely, I know we all aspire to that, and it's just immensely satisfying, and that's really cool. I'll go so I'm not so I don't get the easy path out. Some of you may know me from Dolce. I have this kind of weird thing of being involved with a software company. We really struggled to make the equation work with our labor and staffing. And I engaged another Missoulian who programs, and we started a program just for our restaurant. It's been 8 years ago. And then it turned into maybe other people would want to use this, and we dove in to try to make a company. And here we are 8 years later, and we now have about 600 restaurants using our software. And when I think back of how much we've been in the trench for how long and how many days of tears more than joy it took us to get here, and that we survived the pandemic, it's something that's just really personal to me, that we have done something that has linked us with a bunch of other restaurants and an industry I'm really passionate about, and it's just kind of crazy. So that's something I'm super proud of. And then this Easter, on a lighter note, if you're Greek, your lamb is kind of your pride and your signature. And this was the first Easter that I put out a lamb to the family that I was like, it's there. This is the best lamb I've ever made. So that's my recent accomplishment. I know it's kind of odd to take the time of a planning session to each speak about ourselves. I think it's actually really important. And one of the themes I'm going to get into today is, how do you take the improbability of a committee like the Public Art Committee that's got so little tailwind behind it? We're not a star organization that's heavily funded where people just want our opinions. This is an action committee that can make things happen if it comes together. And I just made a list of what you guys are proud of, and probably just a inkling of what you bring to the table. But I'm like, holy cow, this is such a cool group of Missoulians that each has something that's unique. And if we look around the table and look at who each other are, we can do stuff together. And I love going into a meeting where just like, look at what we've got. Look at the pieces we have to work with. And we're going to start the meeting there today. So thank you for sharing what I'm sure is just like the tip of the iceberg of each of you. Okay, I have to look at my notes now to see where we're headed next. And I actually have two computers open, so I can try to do this thing I would normally do with whiteboards, but looking at my various screens. One of the things that, and I'm going to pull up my whiteboard now, which is, since I don't know how to do a whiteboard in Zoom, you get an Excel sheet. It's going to be my attempt at a whiteboard. I started the meeting with some of our ingredients. Who are we and what do we bring to the table? When I think of, when I went into the Public Art Committee myself, I was really flattered on two accounts. I looked at who was on the committee, and I'm like, if they really knew who I was, I don't think I would have been invited to this party. So I was deeply humbled to be invited to the company around the table. And there were some real veterans in the table, and Dana Bussard, and people that I was like, these are real artists, and I'm not. And I almost had a little bit of a complex. And then I was excited because I thought, I'm going to be able to lend an opinion. This community wants art, and I'm going to be able to lend my perspective, and got excited about that. And I learned after not too long that the idea of just being able to vote on things is such a down the list, enjoyable, but part of this job. And the much deeper lift was, my gosh, how does this committee pull off great things? And one of the things I took from you when you spoke about yourselves is, even though each of you has a foot in the design world, and the design world excites all of us, it's something we have in common, each of you have put yourself into projects or tasks or art. And so without even knowing very much of you, I know that you know the pain and tears and work of bringing a meaningful project to conclusion. The Public Art Committee is going to call, yes, it's going to call upon our design sensibilities, but it calls upon our ability to figure out how the heck to make impact and bring things through conclusion. And that's really hard. And so I'm going to ask some questions that are the opposite of where we're going to end the meeting. And that's, hey, what are our dreams? What can we do? What can we do together? I want to first raise the odds against us. What are the headwinds we face? Why is this committee in a deeply improbable position to make a difference? And I'll start off with the obvious one. Someone can say it. What's the one thing we need, unless people are just going to volunteer time and effort, which only goes so far? What's the one thing we need in order to produce probably a lot of what we hope and dream of?
Money.
Money. We need money. What are possible sources of money? Those that might come easier than others. What are possible places we get money? And this is just rapid fire. We're not trying to flesh these out.
Local donors interested in the arts.
Donors. What's the big one that's given to us, handed to us?
A percent.
The percent for arts.
Percent for art. Other city monies or public monies.
Grants.
Okay. Grants.
Foundation monies.
Foundations. Okay. All right, those are great. What else is required by the committee that? How do I phrase this question productively? What is required of a board or a committee like ours to produce an outcome? And this both has a positive and a headwind. Like, it requires money, and here's why it's hard to get money. What's needed from a group like ours in order to produce a result?
People.
People, and I'll put action by that, right?
A plan.
Mm-hmm.
People and action.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Previous examples. I mean, like, other artwork.
Precedent.
Yeah.
We need a canvas, right? Places to put art, opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one of them, maybe?
Yes.
A plan, I would add.
And I'll attach organization to that. Okay.
I know I'm not thinking of the right word, but legitimacy. I mean, to realizing that we are, or everyone realizing we're a legitimate organization and worthy of everything we're getting. and whether that be association with the public sector. My brain cell's not working.
No, I get you. I get what you're saying. It's that we're an organization that whether it's at a, I'm going to try to take a stab at this, whether it's at the public or the institutional level, or just the general public, that we're afforded that role with the perspective in which we're regarded.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, cool. So these are all things required. You've hit, and we don't have to flesh out every single one of them, but I want us thinking about this. For this group of awesome, talented people to make a difference in this community for the brief chapter that we all have when we're in this committee's going to outlive us. And we're like in this chapter, in this moment in time, we need money. We need opportunities. We need to have plans and an organization that could produce an outcome. We need our institution. Our institution is the Public Art Committee, which is a part of the city and somehow has a connection to Missoula Arts. We need it to function and to be regarded with legitimacy. And if all of these things came together, we can imagine this body producing some pretty cool outcomes. There are headwinds against all of these. And I'm going to jump in with one that just strikes me right out of the gate. The percent for art, which should be kind of the softball, it should be the easy lob. We should just get money from new public projects. There is pressure to not fund art. I was never a part of a project where somewhere along the way, someone in the city said, hey, this project is exceptional because costs have gone up and we need to figure out a way to not include it. Even though it's included, it will be, and every moment of time, the body is going to feel as though this moment is unique and public art should not be funded. I would imagine that at any stage of the game of raising money, it's intuitive that there's just always pressure on money. So pressure to donate, contribute, whatever it may be. Who else wants to name a headwind? What are we facing that makes our mission less probable? I mean, our accomplishment.
I think irregular, maybe training structures or something like that, like onboarding procedures to give committee members the skills and knowledge they need to effectively serve in their role.
Totally.
I don't know where this would fit, but I just think like overall, like art is not accessible. I mean, it's expensive. Like all of the art supplies, art is expensive. Like getting in on these opportunities, like it's taking time out of your day when a lot of people, you know, might have jobs or families. So I don't know where that goes. Maybe, yeah. But yeah.
Totally. Yeah, these things, it's so improbable for art to get prioritized, both by financially and time-wise. Totally. Any others? Anyone else want to lob one in here?
I was just going to throw out the processes for any organized asks for money are sometimes overbearing, and a lot of hoops for everyone to jump through. And when even some of the simplest, smallest funding sources, the hoops that one has to go through can be onerous for some people.
Totally. Okay. Okay,
Sorry,
great.
Greg, I didn't mean to jump in.
It's fine. I was just trying to get Peter to redefine or restate the question at hand.
I think it will help you if you know where I'm headed with today's meeting, and it's. Let me try to think this through. For everything that's required for our success, some of the things you just stated, money, a canvas, proper organization, institution, and legitimacy, those things are all required for us to bring a project to success. And one of the things that I am aware of is that all of these are harder than they should be. They're less probable than they should be. And I think of those as headwinds of why are these things not just obviously happening to us? Why is there friction to these things? And so I'm asking for headwinds. So as part of today's session, we can look at these things as headwinds and address them with our responses.
I think maybe one thing should be on there that we identified in an earlier meeting is having paid leadership. So we have a consistent, someone who is a leader who would be consistently have their eye on the big picture. I feel like, and well, what's been said before is like it's hard to maintain people without it, without a consistency and where we're going. So,
and could
yes.
would it be fair if I phrased that as both continuity of leadership and staff, as well as continuity of institutional knowledge? Is that fair?
Yeah. It's also, I was thinking maybe up in people in action, as part of people in action. I don't know how you're.
Okay. And this is a long way to tee up where our conversation is headed. If we look back so far, we've gotten to know each other maybe a little better of what we bring to the table as diverse individuals with all of our various skill sets. And oftentimes when I'm at these meetings, they begin with, let's revisit the mission statement. And when I was preparing for this, I was like, hey, are we going to like revisit the mission statement, or where is this likely to go? The mission statement's pretty cool. And even if we evolved the mission statement of our group, it's going to be some variation of we're charged with supporting art and artists and art education in our community. I wanted to focus our time today on what's required in our committee. Where are we? Why are these things challenging? And how can we best set ourselves up for the maximum productive output that this group could have in the next 12 months, in the next 24, and the next 36? And so this kind of segues into my, if I'm asking you as a group, is it okay if we approach today in this manner of really looking at these different components, our institution, how we plan and organize, how we fund, and how we may come together as a committee to kind of tackle the fact that we have inherent headwinds with our charge? Is that a fair place to step forward?
Yeah, for me.
And the reason this was on my mind, I know this is kind of a weird, like, hey, what's the specific question? What are we getting at here? But when I became acutely aware when I was on the committee of Okay, we have a little bit of funding, and historically there was no funding before my time and before the Percent for Art ordinance. Everything was donation. And then we're this kind of committee that's attached kind of to the Missoula Arts. We've recently had the benefit of a part-time staff member, but that's even very recent in our overall history. It was my experience that more often than not, we're kind of something that annoys people. Like, what does that group do? I don't really know, but we're a group that doesn't have a tremendous amount of tailwind. And because of the things you mentioned, time, effort, plans, the involvement of groups beyond our control, it's just really hard to make projects, fund them, and bring them into fruition. And it's in that context that I want to focus on where can we come together and identify how this group can be super productive. And we're going to wind up at some point in this conversation with the dream parts of it. But I think focusing on these things, if you picture us as the engine, I'd love to look at tuning the engine and then look at, hey, the dreaming of the pieces is actually the super fun and the easy part. But if we tune the engine a little bit, then we're going to be in a position to better bring about the dreamy parts of today's conversation. And the reason I look away right now is because I've got two screens up and I've got kind of my next steps of what I think is where I want to take you. So let me take just a moment and look at my notes so I am as articulate as possible in my next chapter. I'm just going to pick a point in this web. I'm going to talk about a few things we're going to be talking about. We're talking about how does a committee actually function? Like, what is our role on the committee? And I'm going to talk about that in the context of we may have this other piece of a new paid position, director and staff. We've got a chair of a committee. We've got these roles that we play as committee members or as subcommittee chairs. And so this is going to sound like an odd question, but if we look at ourselves as a committee and we look at these various things, we've got member. Actually, I'm going to line these up over here so I can type underneath them. We've got member, we've got chair, we've got a possible director. Is that the new position that's being contemplated? And we've got support, which is the coordinator.
And vice chair, Peter.
Vice chair. Vice. I'm going to start off with what's going to sound like why is that even a question? What are the roles, what are the functions of you as committee members? And then we can start to put them into buckets. But as rhetorical as this question sounds, I think it's a really important question. What are our roles as committee members? Or as the committee itself, and we can figure out which bucket these goes in, but what do we do?
Peter, I think that we're a representation of the greater whole, and I think that we all have different areas that represent interests for obviously our community. I don't know what you want to call that as, but like that was definitely my interest coming in as someone who has like a 21st century digital perspective of things, right? But also is rooted in the history of art.
And I get that, and I think that's really important here, is that you have a constituency and an ability in mind that you bring to this. But when you show up at a board meeting and you think this board has been tasked with something, and I'll give you a personal example just so it's a little easier to appreciate where I'm headed. Our group by itself is just doing potentially nothing. We show up at a meeting and we're starting with a blank canvas. How do we get something to happen other than the parts of us where we're obviously asked for an opinion? I'll give you the obvious. The softballs are, someone brings in an art call and we have to judge it. That's one thing, or help select an artist. But we as a group have to turn from thin air. If you look back and you look at Passage and Perseverance, or you look at any public art example that's in Missoula that you can see that this committee is left in its wake, it's literally something coming from nothing. How does that happen? We show up at a meeting. How does it just happen?
I just kind of building on Greg's idea. I mean, I look at what we do as the committee, and what our mission is to bring public art, a good public art, to this community. And one of the things I think this community has done very well is come up with ideas about whether we're looking at other communities and what they've done in the public art world, or things that are brand new to this public art world in Missoula. Part of that comes from us, but then many of the things that we've brought to the committee since I've been around are things that the community has come and said, hey, what if we did this? The traffic signal box project was not our idea. It was an artist who is also an accountant, and she said, hey, we did this in my hometown. And I just, and then the committee, which is amazing, gets behind it and said, this is one way we can bring and reinforce public art in this community.
And you tipped into two areas: ideas, and then turning ideas into
projects.
Action
And projects.
I think an idea that
Okay.
I think something that the Public Art Committee, we don't just represent our constituency. I think we're also chosen or choose to do this because we have networks that we can bring to bear. Each of us has our own network. So when there is something that needs promoted or needs done, we can tap into those networks and together create more of a ripple.
Totally. Okay, so we generate, or whether they came from the committee itself or whether we attracted them because of our processes, we generate ideas. We turn ideas into action. We leverage our networks for the results, for greater results. And that includes collaborations. And I'm not looking for a ton here, but and some of these are obvious. Like, of course, that's what we do. But we're gonna take these and break them down into what that means for us. What else here, guys? Anything else that we're missing? I see one big one that I'll contribute if I don't hear it contributed.
One thing that I think about is listening and stewarding community ideas. We're an earpiece for ideas and that are kind of coming through. And I think Kathy kind of referred to this in certain ways that, we have folks who, this is an open committee that the public is welcome to come and attend and bring ideas opportunities too. And so I think being listeners and responders and stewards of opportunities is also part of our function.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love it.
And
I was just going to, oh, go ahead, Greg, you and I like to talk together. You go first this time.
to build on Stoney's response, I think that the hardest challenge that we face is that we're all professionals. We all have other things to do, right? So like we're completely active already. However, our mission really should try to be to find ways to engage our community into understanding what public art is. And I'm looking out my window right now off of McGill on University is a preschool, and there's just like I don't know 50 kids out there, and they love adventures out into the community to find things. And I think that trying to support our youth for an understanding of what art is, what public art is, how important that is in our community is critical. But like I said, we're all busy. But I want to see that happen, So ways to interface with other parts of our council and inner community in ways to engage students at any age with what's happening around our community, so that we can have a youth that grows up to understand the importance of art and its storytelling factors, its relation to, especially in our area, like the First Nation, right? Like, I think that there's a huge critical connection to that might, I don't know where that goes, but, as a committee, I think we can help lead the direction for that and help support those initiatives or funding elements of things that I think that the best part of art is having young exposure.
Okay.
I'm out.
And
I guess I would like to add too, back when we were talking about what it takes. I think it appears and has been consistent in my mind that we never let artists' prominence fall out of the mix. I believe we truly do think of the importance of the artists themselves, whether it be, we've never asked an artist to do something for nothing, literally. I mean, we understand that public art takes money, and we need to support artists in themselves in a variety of ways, in as much as we need to support the idea of public art in all of this.
Kathy, just so I don't misstate that, your highlight there was the support of the artists themselves.
Yeah, and artists' involvement in this.
Okay. Importance of artist involvement.
I mean, we wouldn't have public art if it wasn't for the artists. And from start to finish, I think this committee has always tried to take care of artists within this whole idea of action.
Great. And some of the ideas that I don't know exactly where they fit in, I'm just going to cheat and just start my own category. For these are things we have to deal with, and I'm putting them somewhere. I'm going to come back up here for a moment. And even though this is kind of on the surface a silly question, what does the committee actually do? I'm going to add one here that I feel is really important, and it speaks to some of these things up here that we talked about of what does it take, plans and organization, the institution. The committee, let me think of the right word so I don't fumble this. Okay, I don't want this list to get too long. I want to keep it fairly simple, but I want us to collectively ground with this list, because on the surface, this stuff is so easy to wash over, whether we're business owners or whether we're on a committee. This bit right here, we begin with ideas, and we can get into the nuances. Do they come from community? Do they come from artists? Are we sending messages to the youth and getting them back? All this stuff. But at our core, without an idea, we have nothing. With an idea, we can turn an idea into action. The network is the recognition that this requires an insane amount of collaboration. And so we leverage ourselves through connectivity. And then the nurturing of the institution, and this took me a while on the committee to appreciate, if the Public Art Committee is a bus, it's easy to be on this bus as committee members and to look around and go, hey, we're really good drivers, and we're going to figure out that you're driving today and you're on shotgun and you're looking at the map and you're on Wi-Fi figuring out something. We can all see each other as the collective drivers in the bus, but the attention to the bus itself is so critically important to today's conversation and our thinking of what our jobs are. A huge part of our job is making this institution effective. And that means not losing what its best when the machine has been tuned in the past. What did that look like? And we're all going to be off this committee in a matter of years. And it will be people who we don't know. Did we leave them a good vehicle so ideas can get turned into action? The nurturing of the institution is the stuff that makes the Public Art Committee work, whether we're the ones driving it or not. And some of these things were mentioned up here as headwinds. When we talk about organization, when we talk about legitimacy, when we talk about all these things, so that is going to be one of our conversations today. When I look at how we get things done, we have meetings, and then we've got various people who do things. When I look at starting with the chair is very important because they've got to keep you all or we all reminded of what our job is. I would volunteer something on the chair's list of, and I guess this is going to span all of our lists of when we have the benefit of a director and as a support coordinator, is keeping track of institution, keeping track of what else do we need to be keeping track of in order to allow committee members with limited time and limited resources to accomplish something.
Setting, excuse me, setting expectations, meeting goals and deadlines.
Keeping track of the institution, keeping track of goals at its highest levels. That's absolutely it. And one of the kind of anxieties I've heard so far, and I experience this anxiety, is, oh my God, we're all so busy. And Lisa, you raised the point of, as leaders come and go, what's the deeper thread that can keep track of everything we're working on? And the support person, absolutely. And if you guys have the benefit of a director, being able to task the director with what they're keeping track of or helping us keep track of our action plans is going to be an amazing organizational benefit for this committee. So I'm going to kind of lump all these together and not get too bogged down here, because I think my questions are not inspiring a ton of questions right now. So I want to get past this phase. But one of my goals for you all today is that I'm going to take a pause for a minute and be more articulate about my question of where I want to take us, so it feels more groupy than me just trying to get an idea on the table. Okay, I want to take these two general buckets, keeping track of the institution and keeping track of our ideas, which are going to turn into action. And that's going to collectively be our goals. And you know, some of these maybe here's our 5-year, 1 year, and we can get to those kind of things. But when you look at the workflow of this committee has, and let's start with the idea piece, and then we'll come back to the institution piece, because the institution piece is really important. This committee has an idea. We're going to come out today with a few ideas. We're going to have some short term, we're going to have some medium term, we're going to have some long term, and I know that's the funnest part, and I know we're going to get to that part. But when we get an idea on the table, and we've got committee members with limited amount of time, how does an idea, and this is kind of not meant to be a complex question, but how does an idea get turned into action?
It requires a point person. Somebody owns the idea, and you set, you know, a number of goals or action steps, and then somebody executes on those action steps.
And I would add either a point person or a subcommittee, because again, getting back to that, everybody's busy. Some of the projects are smaller and one person can handle it. Oftentimes it's a bigger project and you need 2 or 3 people working together to bring it back, to lay out some of the beginnings, and then bring it back to the committee as a whole for approval on.
Although I think the first thing that happens is that we talk about the idea and agree that it's worth taking up. And then the point person comes into play.
Correct. Yeah.
Good point.
Yep. So project approval,
Okay.
prior to point person.
This is it, you guys. This is it. And as simple as this is, you may be like, Peter, we know those things. The idea bank comes above this, whatever our processes are for how we form ideas. But once we have an idea that we collectively say we're going to bring into action, this is, as obvious this is, a point person, which could take the form of, boy, we've got a subcommittee and a chair of that subcommittee, and it has various supporting people on this committee, or maybe they're adjunct to this committee, and action steps. This is how something comes into fruition, right? And as obvious as this is, I've spent so many time on so many different committees or boards where a discipline of being realistic, of detailing the action steps. If we're really going to do X plan, it requires X dollars. It requires a relationship with Y. It requires an act of city council or whatever it is. But this workflow of a point person, the people who are supporting people, being held to what can I realistically accomplish. If we're subcommittees, and I agree, I'm going to raise $1,000 and I'm going to come to 4 meetings, and I don't have the time to do that, I'm going to break the chain here. So a discipline in this flow of point people, supporting persons, and action steps, and that how we utilize chair, vice chair, director, and staff to make sure that this is one of our threads of continuity, I think is of real value for this committee. Is this making sense to you guys? Do you make sense of this? And I know it's simple, and you guys might say, yeah, we already know that. But I think this is going to be really important when we get to our major items, is flagging this as a discipline and really identifying the action steps, identifying action steps and tracking. Okay. Then when we look at the institutional piece, keeping track of the institution and all that the institution needs to be doing to support our processes. And I know this is a bit abstract, and once we start talking about this, it will become more obvious. But let's take a moment and talk about what does it mean in your guys' idea to have the Public Art Committee be a bus that is well-tuned, or a machine that could produce outcomes for future committee members or whoever's on the board.
I think awareness is, just from my own experience, awareness of the community and awareness of the committee are important aspects that could help achieve our goals.
And when you say awareness by who?
Yeah, that's the end result, would be the awareness, and how to get there. We could talk about that through various different means of, say, advertising, or just through the newspaper for the news. Just adding that awareness aspect to that, I think, would be very helpful.
Let me take it a notch higher level. If I'm a business and I'm asking the same question, I might say, our institution as a business, if I sold my business to someone, I would have an operator's manual with my business. Here's how we run our business. You could call them the institutional organizational documents. Here's how we conduct ourselves financially. And we use QuickBooks, and we have 3 times a year we report to council. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts. And when we get into, we need to have awareness for the public, for city council, for future members of the Public Art Committee. Those each have their sub buckets, like the website or our forward-facing materials. but what are the institutional pieces that we are the stewards of? And I kind of named some ideas as if I was speaking about us as a business, but what are the institutional pieces that we should be able to hand the next committee and go, this is how this committee works?
I think maybe like relationships, like key relationships in the community that we like work closely with. I know like when I first came on, I didn't really know what like Arts Missoula was, and I think just kind of clarifying what each of those are. I mean, all of the galleries. I don't know. So just yeah, as broad or as specific as you want to make that.
Totally.
Recording, again, just having those process and procedures written down or reaffirmed if we've had them written down. So they make sense.
A short history of the projects and publications that we're responsible for.
I think an
Totally.
explanation,
Institutional knowledge.
explanation of the percent for arts and what projects are eligible or included.
And how that relates to our maintenance, long-term maintenance, and why we have that actual 1.5%. So versus 1%. Great. That's cool.
Totally. This is it, you guys. Totally. And Kathy, you've often used the word when I've been with you of our collaborations. Those are kind of related, but I would say one step off of our key relationships. Somewhere in there is a blend of collaborations, right?
No. Correctamundo.
Okay, what else?
I don't know if this is where this fits, but it comes to mind something about like clarification on opportunities of representation and like leveraging and advocating for our efforts within the framework of the city, the institution of the city. I mean, we're called the City of Missoula Public Art Committee, and I've never been invited to an opportunity to advocate for the arts in front of representatives. And Heidi, maybe that's really what you do, but it's interesting that as a committee member, I feel as about dislocated from it as possible.
Can you, I'm getting what you're saying, and I want to ask you to restate that one more time in a way that I can capture it more, because I think you're onto something that's really important.
Something about like definition of, or I don't know, clarity around opportunities to advocate for the arts with the City of Missoula, something like that.
Opportunities.
So maybe like advocacy, is that? No?
Yeah, like advocacy and representation opportunities, something like that.
Opportunities to engage. Totally. I have the same feeling. We're a vehicle of the city, yet what are our touch points with the city?
Right. And so it kind of ties in a little bit with Danny's key relationships piece ultimately. But, you know, it's also interesting, like, you know, the downtown master plan and everything, like we were tangential at best involved with that. But arts and public arts and large scale public arts were central to their proposal. So where is that disconnect?
Right. Totally. And these each can be unpacked, but I like the level we're on right now. So if we're building while we're the stewards of the bus, it's easy to look at, and when I say easy, it's not easy, but it's intuitive to go to, I want a sculpture park. I like spending some time on what does the bus look like if it's well tuned? So whether we plug in sculpture park or, X project, that we go, sweet, we can now plug that into our well-tuned bus and it's going to take care of things, okay? So under the institutional, we're giving this bus to the next public art committee, or we're going to drive it for a while. Anything else that's obvious that it should go into this bucket.
Budget.
Budget and accounting. I'm going to put accounting, budget, and reporting.
I'd like
How about accountability? Okay.
I'd like to add thoughtful public relations campaigns.
Can you restate that? I caught part of it bleeped out.
Thoughtful public relations campaigns.
Let me think of that in my own, let me digest that. Public
So we do
campaigns.
things, and often those things are invisible because we don't get press. So how do we publicize what we are accomplishing?
Communications plan.
It's public relations. Why?
PR plans, PR
campaign.
Vehicle for people. I'm gonna make this really general right now, so it's one that could be unpacked. And I'll give you an example. If the vehicle, and I'm separating the vehicle from some of the more action steps, the vehicle might be that we conclude as a committee, our website and our email and our public releases to the press should be so well tuned that they're just always on play. That might be an expression of the machine being well tuned. Is that fair? Or is there something beyond? The content may be us being thoughtful of what is the message and that kind of thing, but the vehicle of PR should be the mechanisms that are baked into the bus. Is that fair, or am I missing the mark?
When I said thoughtful, I guess strategic would have been a better word.
Vehicle for strategic PR. Okay. And I know that's not a beautiful phrase, but I think we've got what you're talking about here. Okay.
Hey, Lise, can I ask, when you said that for PR, were you thinking of entire social media campaigns and all of that, as well as, because we mentioned press releases, but were you thinking of social media to go in with that?
Yes, just
okay.
Anything that we have that is a way
PR.
of communicating what we do. So.
Yeah, otherwise I was going to add it because we've just tried, to make that dent. And I figured you wanted to include that, but I just was wondering.
Okay. Awesome. Love it. Okay. So some of this stuff may be like, why is this revolutionary? This is stuff we talk about all the time that we need to do. I'm going to suggest to you that this list, whether it's intuitive or whether this is like, hey, this is actually helpful to see it in this framework, I'm going to suggest to you that if our meetings, starting from annual planning through here's our monthly meetings, and here's our tasking to heads of committees to chairs, to directors, to staff would contemplate these matters and track them perpetually, like track with discipline under the institution these buckets. Are we nurturing our key relationships? What's the status of collaborations and anything that needs to be going on with those? What's our collective handbook? What's the operating manual of the Public Art Committee? We could all die, and I'm being overly dramatic. Someone could come in and pick up the owner's manual and drive the bus again. If we have a body of the history of our collective work, a good education of the history of the public arts, which can be leveraged to educate public, committee members, new staff, council. That's awesome. Our maintenance expectations, that's part of our mission, absolutely. That we are clear on our engagements with the city, which is our parent. That we are clear, and this is kind of a subcategory of our processes and procedures, our handbook on our accounting, our budgets, our accountability, our reporting, and we are clear on our what is our vehicle, and is it well tuned for PR, for social media? If we scored 10 out of 10 on all these things, how would you guys feel about the bus? Would you guys feel pretty good? And that's kind of a cool exercise right now. And this isn't meant to be like, bummer, we're only a 1 on these, but if we were to I guess I was going to suggest maybe we take a current score. I think that's kind of a waste of time. I think the goal is to have a 10 on these. That we're a 10. We're a 10 on all these things. And based on time, I'm going to tease some of these things up that can be teased out a bit more. And I'm going to let some of these topics get just put on the table, and then we'll start teasing out the ones that we have time for. But I want to make sure we don't miss anything that's important. But for the moment, I'm going to say, if these institutional things, which I'm calling the bus, we could rank ourselves and say, yeah, we got to the point where all of these are a 10. I think we'd all think the bus is capable of whatever we throw at it. And if we all leave the committee and someone else comes on the committee, the bus is going to keep driving. That's kind of a cool feeling, right, guys? Then when we come back to this, when we say, yeah, our collective job is to generate ideas. Some of these ideas have already come out. The importance of artist involvement in processes, a specific project or another. I've already heard values from you that I'm sure are going to lead to ideas. This obvious but insanely potent workflow of point person, support people, and meticulous and disciplined tracking of action steps is going to be the meat of this group. And now when we get down to, okay, we've got an idea and it's $5,000 idea, or it's a $100,000 idea, or it's an idea of year 3, the ability to put it into a disciplined set of steps and leverage the engine are the ways that the idea is going to turn into something or be rejected, to say, hey, we don't have the horsepower yet to pull that thing off, whatever it may be.
Peter, can I jump in and
please.
This may be a ridiculous question, and forgive me for upending your proposal a little bit. When I consider our bus, I think of this model and how you're structuring it, it's assuming we have a bus driver. And actually right now we have a substitute bus driver. Thank you, Kathy, for your service. But the reality is this challenge we have is so are we all bus drivers? Are we like without clear leadership? Can we actually, you know, are we even prepared to set this framing device? Or should our entire focus be on how do we get the person in place to be the bus driver to, you know, help us and kind of steward these issues? So anyways, excuse me.
Love it. Love it. Let me suggest two thoughts that come from that question. I think it's a really important question. If someone on the committee, whether it be Kathy wanting to continue to embrace this role, or whether it be a committee member, present or future, is contemplating being a part of this, being a chair, and or, because these can happen at different moments, we achieve the benefit of getting our director and our next staff person. And on day one, chair or staff person says, what the heck are our objectives? Knowing a list, however far along we are at the continuum, today we're at step 1 or step 5 or step 8 of any of these things, knowing what list we're trying to manage is maybe a great starting point. And I don't think this list is very like year to year. I think this is the list. It can get massaged year to year, but this is nuts and bolts stuff. We need accounting and budgeting. We need that regardless of who's driving and when. So I want to acknowledge just the importance of the list itself. Then when we get into who's the bus driver, I think there can be a conversation that says, and I'm going to volunteer something that says, since we don't have the director yet, and we don't have the next support person yet, I would say I would suggest that the chair is the key person to track this list and then articulate the director and the support staff's roles in supporting the Public Art Committee in keeping all these things on track. So I think before you even have the next round of support you have, we might agree that the chair should be tracking and reporting on these items from annual planning, every single meeting into the end of time. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, and it makes me think about you know, the assumptions of our meetings oftentimes are generative. Like when we meet together, our agenda items are quite generative. Like what ideas do we have? What new ideas do we have? What actions can we take? And this to me is less generative and more about refinement and kind of like it's a quieter, more internal work of the committee. And I think we like the generative work better. Ultimately, we're creative people, so this stuff typically kind of maybe takes the back seat. But you know, coming in for an executive director, for example, will benefit from having infrastructure in place for sure. I agree with that.
Yeah, and the idea is here's a way that both of those urges may get satisfied. When we have the luxury of staff, the generation of materials that are born from kind of staff feedback, report formats, the beautiful thing is that all this stuff can live online. Here's how our social media is managed. here's how our accounting gets done. First thing, if I'm your chair and I get the benefit of a director and a supportive staff person, first thing I'm doing is handing them this list and going, this is the stuff that nobody likes dealing with, but it actually has to be awesome. Every meeting, we want to see progress and where we are on the scale of 1 to 10, so the engine works. Does that make sense?
Well, and
And kind of how cool is,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Well, just thinking about
Please.
these pieces too, like there's a complexity between all of them with different time frames, and some are built on top of others. So being strategic about collaborations and community engagements, I mean, that's something that takes a considerable amount of time and takes a follow through and consistency with long-term vision, and that hopefully builds the capacity to then support new collaborations. And so, you know, that's something that kind of is difficult for a volunteer committee to, you know, manage and see through.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Let me take a stab at unpacking 4 of these, because you've hit on something that is really important. Our committee, we're collectively super creative, and Stony, you're amazing. I know what you do, and I just heard about your own testimony about something you observed bring full circle. I would submit this: the satisfaction that you got of seeing something go from idea to conclusion is something every committee member wants. And when your meetings start and you're in the generative phase, we want nothing more than the idea to come into fruition. I think we're really dependent on these institutional pieces and the discipline to our action steps more than we often think about day to day. And I'm going to unpack just a few of these. I'm going to take key relationships and I'm going to move it over here. And I'm going to pick a few of these that I think are worth a few minutes of our time. And I'm going to start with the fact that the percent of art. If we're all to, you know, your first day on the committee and you're like, where do we get money to spend? Where's the lowest hanging fruit? Percent for art. And I know from having been on the history how vulnerable, and now it's like 1.5% or whatever it is, because we got it boosted through, it didn't happen by accident. We took initiative and we boosted that percent and we got some maintenance stuff on it. And I'm going to talk about the percent and the financial piece, financial or the accounting. Why am I putting that under relationships? We're so at risk of not getting our biggest boost, something from a public press, because everything has an excuse of why it should be able to get around it. And relationships, these things just don't happen. No one's looking out for us. To protect our percent for art so we can do cool stuff with the lowest hanging fruit, which is a public process, what are the relationships that need to be nurtured and massaged like our children in order to land the money that's our lowest hanging fruit? What are those relationships?
Administrative relationships, mayor, city manager, finance director. Very often it was the finance director who made sure that when the budgets came through and that the percent was taken care of.
Okay.
And that people didn't forget about it.
These are great.
And I don't know
These
if
are great.
that's the
Who
right
else?
title. I don't know if that's the right title these days.
I'm going to just use it so we keep rolling, but the person in the city who tracks the finances, whatever that is. What other? Who else? city council, right, guys? Okay, and any other, so we're probably missing some, but anything else in probably MRA, right? MRA's got to be on this list, right?
Yeah, MRA, and
they
I would
can-
say department heads too, particularly Public Works, Parks and Rec.
I have a question. What does MRA stand for?
Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And let me tell you guys, if you guys haven't already done something, these guys have a deep pocket and the ability to leverage projects and get more funding for projects goes straight through the MRA.
Also in there probably should be private partnerships with business owners. Anybody who has ever reached out about having a wall available and interested in murals or, I think this brings to mind, do we have a CRM? Do we track any of our, even if it's just in an Excel spreadsheet, like, is there access to a database that speaks to our relationships and management of those relationships?
Now we're talking. And let me ask this. And because my scale of 1 to 10 leaves so many possibilities, I'm going to make it a scale of 1 to 5. So it's 5. 5 being the strongest relationship. If I had a level 5 relationship with the mayor, if I had a level 1 relationship with the mayor probably doesn't like me. If I have a level 3, he'll probably return a call, but I'm probably annoying. If I have a level 5, I can probably get a meeting and go into a thoughtful back and forth and say, Mayor, what would it take to get X done, and what's your political angle on this? Okay. Who right now in the committee has a level 5 great personal relationship with the mayor, where they can get that appointment and get a half hour of his time this week? Heidi.
I mean, I don't know if you want to call it a great relationship, but I certainly can call him and he calls me back and we can set meeting dates, but I don't know he's always done that.
Okay.
So.
And let me not dwell too much on where we are, but I think a relationship, and I'll go into what I think some of these mean, city manager, city council, these are people that the difference between, and Kathy, this is not indicated to piggyback on your having a good relationship or not good relationship. The difference between getting someone in an administrative position to, they know me well enough to return an email, to I have a personal relationship. And I want you guys to think back for a few minutes when we did our intro and you guys all commented on, here's some things that I've accomplished that I'm proud of, or in my department or in my field. I guarantee you that in your list of wake of accomplishments, there are people you needed to lean on to get things done. And without a personal relationship, like we get together and I've earned that person's trust and respect. And when it comes to politics, because this stuff is not straightforward, no one just wants us to get 1.5% and pull it away from their project. So much of this is more political than we wish it was. Hey, behind the scenes, what do we need to do and who needs to love this project to get the right advocacy at a city council meeting? There is so much that needs to happen with our relationships behind the scenes to protect or increase our funding. Something's going right now because someone got the mayor to suggest a part-time director. That's awesome. When our relationship went from 1% to 1.5% of public works, it was because of the relationship with a few people in government. So if we go back to Stoney, your point of it's more intuitive us to be creative at our meeting and to focus on how do we use our skills and talents as artists and designers and lovers of artists and design to further the cause. And I'm going to submit, if it's not part of our routine to be going, who met with the mayor this week and what was his angle on this? So if we have a headwind with the mayor, whereas if it's like, hey, I got some really good intel this week from Heidi, knows 3 committee members who are going to support this, but it needs to check these boxes. Well, how do we win those guys? It's the quality of our feedback. When a new council member comes on board, does our engine, is it fine-tuned enough that this is the packet they get and this is the personal relationship they got and someone from our committee told us them? Do we take the initiative twice a year to go to council with a deck and a PowerPoint that reminds them of everything we've done and everything we've come up with a professional budget to actual? And if we don't have this mundane piece of our engine in place, then the creative piece is at the mercy of, hey, where's our funds? Where's our funds? And how do we get to the dream day where we go to council and go, we're so good that we want $100,000 put in the budget just for us to go commission on art? And I'm getting too long-winded. This needs to come from you guys, but I wanted to spend a moment why I'm talking about the pieces of the engine, because the creative pieces, the action pieces can unfold if the engine is fine-tuned. And the engine doesn't get fine-tuned overnight. It's not like next meeting you go, hey, we're going to just do all this stuff. But it means, hey, this list is really important, that when we get the opportunity for a director and we get the opportunity for a support staff, we're not letting Tom from Missoula Arts kind of tell them, we're taking the reins and we're coming in with our hot list of 10 things. And we're saying, hey, if we're at kind of level 1 to 5 on all these things this year, by the end of the year, we want to be a level 10. Does that mean we don't stop building on level 10s? No, never. But I want to be able to have the engine so well tuned that when the creative piece is put in the pipeline, the engine is prepared to do its job. What else in the engine do you guys think is important? I teased out one of them because I think the relationships are so important. They're so important. And this can get teased out further and further. But you guys don't have council relationships. You guys aren't making presentations to council. It's like, hey, I just saw something get built and we didn't get 1.5% for it. Why? Because no one's looking out for us. There is no, and even if we have a staff member, it's up to us as a committee to be thinking about this every single meeting because it's politics. There's no way around it, no matter how much we love the artistic side of it. What else in this list should we take is worth a few minutes to tease out?
Could we elaborate on processes and procedures?
Yeah. I'm gonna
mainly
lump these two. Oh, go ahead, please.
Well, mainly, visibility to the public. Just like in other agencies with good governance, like having good public visibility, the public having that personal relationship, the public knowing what we're doing, our actions, how we're going about doing it, receiving input along the way.
Okay. I think your comment, if I'm hearing you right, which by the way is so important, just like I'm talking about, God, mayor's got to know, you know, and key council members, if the community has no idea what we're up to, or if artists don't, the machine's going to be limping along, right? So what you're talking about fits into a couple of buckets, and the handbook and processes and procedures is not a unique silo. It tips into everything. And I'll give you an example of how something fits into two buckets. It might be one of our responses to your inroad there is, without fail, we do a posting, we're posting to Instagram once a week, and without fail, we're doing a more in-depth posting at least once a month. And I'm just making stuff up. It could be whatever you feel is important. And so this may be social media is X, Y, and Z, and the procedures and processes may be staff is tasked to engage committee for content, and everyone's been trained on the rules for social media. So there's like the nuts and bolts stuff that makes sure stuff happens. And then there's the stuff itself. What are our platforms? What are our ways of touching the community and touching artists? And so with that in mind, did I start to step into an area that touches on what you were talking about, or can you add on to what I started here?
I think it's yes, and without even using the tools of social media, I just think the power of public presentation for conveying, you know, it kind of hits on a couple of the different buckets. There's the integrity element. And that's only secured.
When you say public
through,
presentation, what do you mean? What's public presentation? Do you mean to council, or do you mean to Missoula?
To Missoula, I think it can. One example is planning for in transportation. Decisions are made based largely on data, but a great extent of effort is put forward to presenting those ideas. And it's not necessarily like going back to the drawing book, like we just need to keep generating new ideas, but we need to take these high valued ideas in our community and then ask for that public input back. And sometimes these agencies will visit this public engagement 1, 2, maybe 3 times. And as you're doing that, you're stiffening, you're relating to the public in a way that defends the institution. It builds public trust. So.
Okay, absolutely. And I get what you're saying. It's kind of a loop here. It's not just a one-way machine. If we're at our ideal bests, we have vehicles that allow for a loop, right? We've heard, we've responded, and here's what that looks like, okay? So I think social media is a part of that, and the committee, when it can unpack this further, can say, here are the other parts of that. The other parts of the handbook, we talked about accounting and accounting procedures. That's just such low-hanging fruit. Like, here's what we do. We put these reports together. They're done monthly. They're reported to council twice. And just like any business board, we're reported to, and whoever that, we talked about relationship. You can see how these buckets are not mutually exclusive. I talked to the finance director, and they reconciled. We reconcile, and we do. We have a balance sheet. We see that every single month, just like a business would. And that's part of our processes, okay? I pulled in here history of our collective work because someone raised that above on a couple of points, on a leadership perspective and on I can't remember how it came up, but the ability to have formal documents or decks. Here's the PowerPoint of when a new committee member joins, or that we send someone who asks about the Public Art Committee, or when there's a new council person, here's the deck they get, you know, whatever it may be. That institutional knowledge, if it's not just baked into our handbook, we're reinventing the wheel every time we want to tell our story. So Stony, back to our earlier question of, and Lisa, I think it was you who said, boy, what's the role of knowing this list, both when we don't know who all the drivers are, or drivers may change, and we really are good at teasing out the creative side of things. I'm trying to push you in a direction that says we're going to be better at what we do if this list just becomes part of our DNA, whether it's informing staff as they arrive, whether it's I'm thinking about being the director or the chair of the Public Art Committee this year or next year, beyond just having good relationships with everybody and kind of being stoked to really jump in. Am I stoked to be the person who makes sure these things are kept on track? You know, that's why I think this is of value. So let me pause for a sec. I feel like I'm getting too long-winded again, and ask, where do you guys want to take this list? Or we can not spend more time on this list, but do you want to tease out any more of these buckets? Is this resonating with you guys that this is actually a really important bucket to make part of our DNA?
You know, one thing I'm noticing that looking at that, I mean, fundraising isn't in there necessarily. Percent for art is, but actually fundraising or fundraising plan, strategy, implementation. I mean, if the chairperson is not tracking that, or the director is not tracking that, then nobody is tracking that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that requires a considerable amount of planning. And that
the fundraising is huge. The fundraising is huge beyond the percent of art, and I'm going to put it up here so it's a little bit more tightly engaged with it. And again, one of the things we're going to find is these buckets aren't neatly siloed. They're overlapping, and when we get into the action and ideas, we might find a project has its own fundraising goal, but in the bigger picture here, that being one of the, you know, and that ties in with our financing and our budgeting as well. It's central to our lifeblood and our existence. So couldn't agree with you more. That should live on this platinum list of core responsibilities. What else, guys? And I can take this in a more creative direction, but I want to not leave this list because it touches on some of these things that we started the day with, where we talked about what are some of the tailwinds, and we talked about pressures on our time. How do we utilize staff? We talked about hurdles. We've talked about the clarification of who's doing what. I think if we understand the institutional part of the Public Art Committee, then we're in a position to inform staff, to have expectations of the chair. Do you guys see value of spending any more time or asking me more questions of what we're talking about, or even teasing out any more of these buckets right now?
Actually, going over this sort of made me think about like, well, if we're not doing this in our meetings, what are we doing in our meetings? Because we aren't doing a whole lot of this. And it just like, I think one of the things that throws the committee off track so much is that because we're open for public, you know, there can be 3 visitors in a meeting, which we only have once a month. And those people can talk for like 45 minutes, and it just kind of squishes all the time that we have together, the collaborative time that we have together. But because we have this duty to allow people to come and talk, I mean, maybe we need a system of managing that, because we can come with our little plans of what we're going to get done. I mean, I know this has happened before where I've come with, you know, prepared to show a project and the steps being taken on it, but really only had like 5 minutes to dwell on it because the upfront time had been taken by 3 people who all talked for 30 plus minutes on, you know, projects that possibly won't even. So I guess weighing that public interest part of it with the need to get down to the grist of work.
So check this out. I think you touched on something so cool. And believe me, anyone who's been on the committee, including myself, knows exactly what you're talking about. Totally know what you're talking about. And imagine if we have this mentality that we have a bus with all of our institutional knowledge, all of our policies and procedures. And what are policies and procedures? They're the best information and habits that have been developed to date. Are they fluid? Of course they're fluid. Let's say right now in our policies and procedures manual, and this is so cool because this literally can be a manual. We could start a Google Doc tonight and go, here are our policies and procedures. And they all have chapters. It's just like a book. And we go use of meeting time. And we might decide amongst ourselves that at a minimum, we need 15 minutes of a meeting that touches on the bus. And again, with the humility that we can't accomplish all this in a meeting, but if the strategic planning meeting identified 10 things and we're working on them, maybe we're going to touch on one of those, and maybe it's someone's job just to keep track of the 10 and say, this is the one we're going to talk about this meeting. So that may become baked into the meeting is the bus, okay? Then we may say, God, we've noticed, and I've noticed this too, that people who want to bring an idea or they want to submit a mural or whatever can really consume meetings time. Well, that we're going to have the discipline that a maximum of, and I'm just making up numbers here, these aren't suggestions, 15 minutes towards a public idea. That may mean there's a maximum of 1 speaker who comes with an agenda, and it may mean that anyone who's just generic public comment gets cut off after 5 minutes or whatever, unless they want to get on the agenda with full-blown thing. So meeting management is something that you guys can come up with one of these frustrations and say, hey, let's immediately put it in our collective wisdom bank, and starting next meeting, let's be more disciplined with our time. It doesn't mean that the public can't eventually get on board or come in or have continuing conversations, but you guys, your time is so precious. And if we're not intentional about how we're using our time, we don't get to our priorities. Does that make sense? Is that fair to look at creating expectations of the value of our time?
Yeah, that I'm so glad, Lisa, you put that into words, because I was trying to think of how to say that, and I'm like with the public, and I was thinking maybe in my head I put a bit underneath relationships, our relationships with the community, as just a big one. And yeah, So it kind of goes into what you said too. But
Totally. And I felt the least productive, I felt like the least productive meetings I attended when I was on the committee were ones where it felt like the entire committee's time is being consumed by issues that don't take an entire committee to vet. So this is where subcommittee becomes so important. Yes, you want this to be a forum where people can come and voice an idea, but if I've cut you off after 5 minutes, I may give you the message of, hey, you've come with a great idea. You're going to be meeting with Peter really for the next couple of months, who will really inform you on the rules of murals and this, and show you how to raise money. And we don't need the whole committee for that. And then at the end of 6 months, if you've done your steps and you've got a plan that requires the wisdom of the group, then you get an agenda item and you get 15 minutes of our meeting. It's value of our time. Remember how we started the meeting. We have all these rock stars who know how to forge stuff and weld stuff and engaged in the indigenous community, and a council member. We don't need 100% of our brain power behind someone who has a question on the first steps of putting together a mural. Does that make sense? Am I connecting on saying something that resonates with you?
On kind of piggybacking on this idea of time and thinking about the function of subcommittees, this is kind of a limit of my knowledge or understanding. Are we required to meet, like, are we required to have the monthly meeting schedule we have, or is there the option to entertain, and I don't know that this is right for us, it just came to mind, entertain like a quarterly meeting schedule along it, then using subcommittees to do more of the lifting. And I say that from the experience of our board. We've had a lot more impact and workload through that switch versus having everybody together every month and then also trying to make subcommittees work.
Totally. And Heidi, I may ask you, but I know of no limitations that of us creating governance as long as the rules are known and posted and followed.
I don't know what our bylaws say or about that. Kathy, do you?
Mm-hmm.
It is my understanding from the history that we need to meet monthly, but frankly, I've taken that for granted because the Public Art Committee has always met monthly and haven't looked, but I believe the bylaws say that, but I'm going to pull them up right now. Just look.
But again, it's such a great
and that's
question.
Not to say
like,
it can't be changed. So bylaws can be changed.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was headed. Is how important the question is of the weird place I've led this of how can the machine work to produce the best result? And if you as a committee say, boy, based on other board experience, there's a lot more lifting that can be done at the subcommittee level, and let's change that structure a bit, then we're improvising, we're elevating, we're moving the cause forward. Okay.
Yeah, if we
so
could
great point. Great point.
We could have a
to tease out and think about.
If we could have a screening system and then like a listening session for possible projects once a quarter, I think we would save a ton of time.
And maybe there's an agenda for public projects. Maybe that's just 4 meetings a year is when public can bring a project. So I know that feeling of feeling like the committee's at the mercy of just reacting to stuff. And the more we're thoughtful and go, hey, we can kind of do whatever we want. I could make, a given committee member could have the role for this year of being the first touch point of a public inquiry, and only at stage 5 are they able to come to the full committee, because frankly, they don't need the full committee until stage 5, whatever it is. So we're not going to solve all those things in this session, but I want to awaken you to, or hopefully inspire this idea of how precious our time is. And if we're laying the foundation of the machine, of the handbook, here's our best practices, here's what data we look at when we meet, then we may produce a better result than kind of this thing where we react to the things that are the hottest fires each month. Okay. So that is a bit on that subject. Has anyone else want to plunge into this anymore? I hope I'm leaving you, and when I leave you with kind of the conclusive documents, one of the things I'm going to highlight in here is the importance of this list that you may shape. I don't know that we got it right on the first pass here, but this concept of here's the bus, here's the engine, and what engine, how much time do we spend on that each month? Do we have point people making sure these things are tended to, and that institutionally these things become part of our DNA? Anyone else want to tease out or comment on these, or say, hey, Peter, you're way off base, or this feels right? Any discussion around this?
Well, one thing, it's kind of another additive piece to it, but it shows up in other elements. I don't know if it makes sense here, but perhaps it does, is has to do with like new project acquisition or something about understanding what we're taking on, why we're taking it on. And right, we have it obviously in all sorts of different places. I just didn't know if we wanted it under it seems funny to think about like the institution is all these things, but no kind of generative component is part of the institution. I get why it's not,
but to take that a step further, go down a path that's generative, and so we've got a working example.
You're asking for a working example?
What's an idea of the generative idea? And it could be anything. We want a sculpture park,
Sure.
Or here's one we've already talked about, or.
Well, we've been actively, for example, an active thing for us has been murals. That's been one of our key kind of umbrella projects. We've made it clear that that's a priority of our work, and we'd like to implement more. Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about project implementation, like it's not just ideas, but it's also thinking about like how we evaluate and assess when we table things, like what our parameters are of accepting them. There's a whole kind of set of conditions in relationship to starting a project other than the great idea itself. And we're not always organized about which ones we take on. I think we're more opportunistic, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So let me submit this, and maybe this will generate an idea. I still look and say, okay, here would be why institutionally it's so good to have the vault of historic knowledge. I would say if I was the author of today's handbook, I would put a chapter in here that says idea generation through implementation. And this is where the wisdom of current or prior committees could say, here's what's worked for us. for example, we start with a yearly planning process where, everything is considered, and we have yearly to an idea funnel, and we rank some priority projects. We might say they can come in anytime. At any meeting, someone can put in an idea, and here's how. So the handbook might give us a template for even contemplating this. Here is a structure that's worked for current and prior committees of just handling or generating idea inflow. Then we may be able to put it through a certain set of criteria. Then we get more specific and say, okay, once there are 3 competing ideas, we go through a process as a committee where we rank them according to cost, feasibility, X, Y, Z. And I'm going to just keep my notes under here so I can keep them intact. Process could be evaluate, rank, prioritize, whatever it might be. Then, when we get up to this ideas to action that probably looked like of course, Peter, that's what happens with the project. We could tease out the specificity, and we can go here in a moment of how do we put action behind a plan to make sure it comes into reality. We can get into those details, but I still think there's a place at an institutional level to say we've agreed as a committee of the structure that we allow ideas, or maybe there's 4 meetings a year where all we do is think about cool ideas. That's all we do because it's so cool to just get in that creative space. Why not do that? Because we can do whatever we want if we're creative. Someone else piggyback. I'm too talky, but I love that idea. Like, how does idea generation not just tank meetings, but have a place in our lives?
I think the exciting thing is all that's possible. I mean, and to take some of this framework that we've talked about and make a point of talking about that, an item or this idea, so reserving 1 meeting for ideas, timeframes. I think there's been some really good input that's come in from everyone.
Cool. Do you want to tease out any other ideas? There are 2 places I can take us next before I do want to reserve time for some of just the raw creative on the stuff itself. But before we end up there, the 2 places we can tease out a few more ideas. Does anyone want to talk about more about I'm suddenly inspired by how our meeting time could be more intentional and not be subject to being pulled right or left, or how we flow ideas into our group. Anyone want to talk about that, or do you want to move on to the importance of our discipline of ideas to action? That's really the next place I want to take us. So we could talk more about meetings and idea generation, or we can go into a little bit of more the nuts and bolts of making an action item.
That's good.
I think with only a half hour left, we probably ought to go to the action item.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to move murals downward under our idea bank right here. I'm going to tease this one out a little bit with the ideas to action. And I think this ties into when we collectively, excuse my inarticulation at points where my mind goes in four directions at once. I remember being in awe over my committee members during the course of some projects. And when I think of what we went through to get perseverance and passage in the, what's our park called? The Sawmill District.
Silver Park. Silver
Park. In Silver Park. I know this group, because you've all told me at the front end who you are, that you've all got the ability to connect the dots through large projects, pulling agencies in, the fundraising, all the homework we have to do for artists because they don't know how to do it themselves, and on and on. But it takes so much to turn something into action. I've seen projects get to the end of the journey, and a couple of you told us at the start that you're stoked to see something get across the finish line. We all are. I've seen other projects just fizzle. We get to a board meeting and there's no action and no one's raised money and nothing's happened. You're like, okay, some of these just don't seem to have life, and some of them have life. And I want to take a few minutes and say, you guys, you all know the importance of the right questions and the right commitments to get to realistically scope a project, to say this is realistically what it would take, and then to get that to the finish line. So my question is not probably very articulate, but in your own words, if you're to tell the rest of us, what does it take to honestly vet and plan for an idea so it is committed, its action steps are committed so we can see what would happen to actually get to the finish line? What does that look like? What's required for an idea to be truly actionable? Does it begin with vetting of an idea, of scoping it? Does anybody have any ideas there?
I think I would begin with either a conversation with someone, a collaborative conversation, or try to write down the project description that I could submit to the whole committee and get their feedback on. But you need some sort of scope to begin with, so other people can join in.
Yeah, a project overview with maybe examples if it had been something like it or similar, maybe some examples of the project, but anything that you could give the rest of the committee the best understanding they possibly could have. And all of the questions aren't going to be answered, but it's at least the beginning of the conversation.
So you're saying not only the scope, but some of the scope may be the questions that need to be answered, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Questions, and what would else be in there? Potential costs or obstacles, just anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once we've decided we want a mural project, and these are all of the requirements and the things that need to be vetted and the funds that need to be raised. I would assume funding is central to everything. Then as we take the step towards making it actionable, how do we set the engine up for success? How does a committee chair set up for success? What's our recipe for a new committee member who's never been a chair? And we say, this is how those of us who are seasoned would give you a playbook to run as the point person and bring something to fruition, what would we tell that committee member, that subcommittee point?
One thing I often see that is a really simple thing that maybe gets missed is when somebody's the point person, they're responsible for setting meetings, scheduling them, and communicating about them. If it's a subcommittee chair, for example. Yeah. Like meeting coordination, something to that effect.
And what else is the chair responsible for?
Identifying the key players.
And I would say follow up with meeting notes and action items, and assigning those action items, which would have been done in the meeting, but a follow up communications that helps delegate.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Okay, and then when they go ahead.
Working in a public relation aspect to every project. Like to announce it, how are we going to unfold it to the public when it's done?
You would say that, Lisa.
Okay, and then the relationship of subcommittee and point person to full staff, and this comes back to the you guys feeling here's how we use our committee, and we can't possibly do it all. We just can't. Would you guys agree that there's a certain amount of work that is done at the subcommittee level, so we're really bringing the highest levels of judgment back to the full committee? We've reduced this to path A, path B, or pull the plug on the project, and everybody gets to chime in on top of the work that's already been done. Does that resonate with you guys? Does that make sense? Or how would you guys describe it? What do you want the full committee to do in concert with subcommittee work?
Track pulses on subcommittee work. So a full committee is, similar to what you just said.
Okay. So would it be fair to say high level accountability and feedback, right? I, as a committee chair, advise the committee. I will come back next week or next month or next quarter with a recommendation on size, scope, or 2 alternatives for a site, or whatever it may be. And I come back, present the wisdom of the subcommittee with the questions that need either final support or debate, and we treat the full committee as just a precious resource. We've done the homework, and here's the decision or the 2 paths that are teed up. Does that make sense? And again, this kind of tips into that quest that our time is felt honored when we're at these committee meetings, and we're not just all 10 of us talking about every detail of everything, but we're really affirming subcommittee direction. Okay. We may have satisfied this bucket, but I just want to recap before we spend some time on the creative side itself. I think the picture I've wanted you to paint on and unfold is one that recognizes the difference between the bus and the work. And I'm going to leave you today with your ideas that can certainly evolve on. These are things that we should be paying attention to, called the institutional knowledge. And they're so important because they involve relationships, they involve collaboration, they involve our attentiveness to our reports and our feedback and all those things that we teased out. We can't leave these unattended, okay? As simple as it is, I think the collective understanding on what you consider an action process, and one of you raised the point of, boy, how do we even funnel our ideas? What's our best practice there? And that's something that should be a topic and should have definition to over time. Here are the best of ideas of how we funnel an idea, but when it is funneled, we have really high expectations of committee chair and the processes themselves. And only with discipline. And again, once you've kind of thought about these things and decided upon them, and now we look at these other questions we had coming into the day of what does a staff person do? Well, one of the things they do is support a subcommittee member who's the chair of an effort. Here's how I can use you to logistically help me set meetings, or do we have task tracking software that you can show me how to use, and so I can show up to the committee with a professional report. And the staff person is there for us to make our job possible with our limited volunteer time. They don't take over, but they support us so we can leverage our time. So I'll move on from that, but hopefully that resonates with you. Hopefully I've taken some of your ideas and put them into a structure where we can emerge with just more intention of the use of our time and our accountability. If I sign up to be a subcommittee, I'm coming back to the committee with a professional report in the time frame I said I would. Otherwise, the thing doesn't work, or I don't accept the assignment because I knew that this month there's no way I could actually do that. Okay. Okay. I hope that you have found value in the attention I put on the engine and our processes over the ideas themselves. And we may find that, hey, we want to have yet another whole meeting that's just devoted to the creative part, because that stuff is super fun. It's the most interesting of what we collectively do. We had a continuum of, boy, if we're to just invigorate ourselves today with not necessarily being able to narrow down ideas, but what I call the idea bank of, if we're to brainstorm in buckets of 5,000, 25,000, 100,000, 3 different buckets, and then we may be able to rank these and say, yeah, this feels like it's 5 years out, 2 years out, 1 year out, but let's funnel some of these into our current state of affairs. And I'm going to find a spot on my sheet that's not completely used yet by saying, let me go over here and say idea buckets. And I promise I'll clean this up for you before I leave you with a document. And I'm going to use the numbers that were given to me on the agenda and say 25K, 100K. And today isn't the day where anything needs to be vetted or it is a good idea or it's not a good idea. We're going to focus, because our time is precious right now, on trying to make my buckets look kind of cool. But anyone who wants to chime in and just say, this is something I've thought about that's, and you could think of this as small, medium, or large. It doesn't really matter. This is something that's lower hanging fruit. This feels like medium. This feels like 100,000 plus. And I invite any of you to just start putting stuff out there that you think is cool or you've thought about at some point in time, and it's going to become part of this precious idea bank that we're starting.
Do you just like want us to like start telling you that, start naming them off?
Yeah, I do.
Well, I've had this dream. This is actually like one of the dreams that brought me to the public art committee was that there's that big wall on the side of Engel and Volkers, downtown Missoula. It has like a prism thing on there right now, and I've just like always wanted. I know that what was it, the owner of Five on Black came in and was wanting to cover that wall too, and I believe that they are collaborating with the art museum in the mall, if I'm correct. I'm not sure who mentioned that. At least I can't remember. I mean, ideally, it would have been cool to have like an Indigenous artist put a mural on that wall, but again, I'm just excited for that wall to have a cool mural on it. I don't know if that's really not an idea specific to this, but just Indigenous murals in general. And then maybe under the 100K, I've always wanted to do like I don't know if you all have ever heard of like the Santa Fe, like like their market, like it's like Indigenous crafters and vendors, and they have like performances and stuff. Me and my coworker just have always had that idea of like just having like an Indigenous art market. But I know that Zach does something like a little smaller, but yeah, that's just an idea that would be cool to do.
Awesome. Love it. And some of these that I don't know how to put a cost value on, I'm going to leave some of these that are obviously big or small. I may check the box here, but just to, we're going to leave the boxes to fill out over the course of time. But I love just, hey, let's get the idea on the table.
I would like to revisit the Indigenous artist project that represented all the tribes in Montana. I would like for that to be revived. It was
Absolutely.
definitely in the 100,000.
And that's easily $100,000 project, right, Lisa? But or maybe in phased, but yeah,
But
no,
not-
absolutely.
But not to us.
Correct.
It's interesting because reflecting on our generative idea, I mean, I feel like pre-pandemic, we had a really good ramp into what we were focused on. And I think COVID really has, set us back a good bit, and we're just now reassessing the pieces. And also we have new voices on the team who are bringing their dreams into this. And so hopefully they'll share with us some of the things that they would like to see happen while they're here.
Totally.
We did a project with Ben Weiss of the bike pedestrian program that was pretty innovative for Missoula, and it would be fun since we're running out of traffic signal boxes. That was a small project, maybe affordable. And James, you can help me out on this because you know more about it, but more street calming public art, if we will. And it's similar to the 3rd and Myrtle Street, but in other locations. And that's probably a $5,000 to $5,000 project. Also, broadening the mural idea to other mural locations. If in fact, the folks at 5 on Black and Dawn, who owns the building, Maddox from Angle Vokers, if they truly are working with the museum in the mall on that project. We've got other great mural locations, so it would be fun to.
Would it be fair, Kathy, to say find locations, artists, and funding?
Sure. We have a few that have been suggested. I mean, well, I'll make another one after this one. Rattlesnake, Lower Rattlesnake Sound Wall Project. Which could be anything.
Yeah.
That might be
What
a
else
separate
fires
thing.
you guys up? Yeah, okay.
That could
What
be a
else
separate
fires
thing.
you guys up? Please.
I'm just gonna, so it lives on the list. I think the Pack Live still holds promise.
Mhm.
I recognize my capacity is very limited this particular season, but as I it's still a good one. So
Good,
Can
because
you
it's in the
restate that for
public.
me? I didn't quite capture that.
it's called Pack Live. It's funding and supporting live public art experiences. Particularly, we framed it around First Fridays, but it could exist in other forms.
And the public art guide
lives
again.
experience? Public lives experiences? Did I say that right?
Pack Live, PAC. Oh yeah, public, yeah, live art.
Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. Love it. And these can be existing, like you said, hey, let's reinvigorate the Indigenous projects. So whether it's a reinvigoration, whether it's something you've always dreamed of for our community, something you've observed in another community, let's get as much in the mind dump right now as we can. Doesn't have to be realistic or unrealistic or vetted, just something that's cool to put in the bank.
One I'm going to add to the list has to do with, it's a little inspired from the Philadelphia Public Art Committee. They're started through working with juveniles in kind of duress, different circumstances, but doing mural projects with them. This is a dream big kind of situation. I think it should be a program that should be formally managed and have a project coordinator that supports the youth projects, but I think it's awesome.
Cool. And I probably misspelled this, so I'll run a spell check when we're done, but I don't want to interrupt. Keep rolling.
Lisa had one for me. I'm going to try it. She said her battery conked out. If we can add for 5K, put some kind of pack identification on projects in the community. Anybody know what she means by that?
Maybe more signage. I mean, there's a few of our.
That's totally what she means. Marketing and branding.
Yeah, we have bronze signs on a lot of the pieces, but there are a few. For example, Jeffrey Funk, we've never been able to put a sign there because Parks and Rec hasn't allowed us to determine a location, but not for one of trying and continuing to try. But there's a lot of things. So no, that's I can see what she means.
Love it. Love it.
How about James or who else?
Greg went to feed his kids, but James.
Yeah.
Yes. I will add, I guess it doesn't have to be immersive art, but creating better overlap with intergenerational experiences in the realm of the public art that people are experiencing, finding whether it's focused on finding the right location where people of all ages not only have accessibility, but there would need to be the lack of pretension in that setting where almost anyone could feel comfortable. So
Can you help me put that into a sentence? I want to capture it in the way that you're thinking about it, and help me do that.
Targeting audiences and making sure that the accessibility and an intergenerational overlap is occurring, or is able to occur, or likely to occur.
Target audiences with attention to.
You see that as like an interactive form of art, James, or what? How are you kind of seeing the manifestation of it?
I do not know the name of I forget the name of the piece, but the bronze sculptures of the trout swimming next to the Clark Fork River is kind of a wonderful example of the way a senior, particularly on market days where there's generally hundreds of people gathering around, people of all ages and backgrounds are being exposed to that very playful and interactive medium, and you really, it really draws everyone from toddlers to, it really attracts all walks of life, and
Love it.
and creates a setting where these people can engage each other, unlikely engagements.
Love it. Love it. What else, guys?
The Greg Martin, the Episcopal Church project, recounting the history of the All Black Church in Missoula, a collaborative project.
Is that an existing project that we would support, or we would take the initiative on?
Continue working on. We're in, it's still kind of in never land. But in that, yes, they would like to do it. Yes, they would like us to participate, but no.
So the Episcopal, and how would I reference the project? Continue work with the Episcopal what?
Danny, can you help me on the official name of that? I'm looking for it in my notes.
I was trying to find what it was called because I forgot, and I wasn't gonna say anything until I found it. You can just put you could just put the church mural.
Or church,
so, yeah.
Church project, because I think
Church
they're
project,
looking at
yeah.
sculpture too.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. You could just put, yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Danny's our committee chair on that one, subcommittee chair.
Awesome. Awesome.
Lisa wanted to add those photo op frames from, like, she was talking about Theo and Lily doing those fun photo op monster creatures that lived in different homes.
Am I using the right words here? Photo op
Yeah.
monster creatures?
Yeah.
Works.
I think she presented it better. I'm just sharing.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, good. I figured out how to exit minimized.
I mean, I guess when I think about this too, I think of like what parts of that master plan are still wanting to be realized, and how can we help facilitate making that happen? I mean, there's multiple invested parties in making that plan happen and then realized, and murals were, again, still at the center of it. And also, I mean, there was talk of wayfinding. We kind of backed out of a wayfinding project, but I think especially in with the murals, there's a harmony of priorities and.
Okay.
Well, as long as we're dreaming, I'd like to still throw out for long term is some sort of entryway sculptures or artwork in as people come into Missoula. Because,
Brave.
pardon?
I said you're brave.
I know.
Good,
Well, you
good. We
know,
want brave. All right, awesome. And I want to respect your end time as much as possible. So anybody who's got something on the tip of their tongue or their idea, please let me get it on the list here. And then I'm going to wind up by talking about how we will continue with this. This isn't an end point, it's a start point. But anybody else who's got something that they've been meaning to put on here, please volunteer it.
I've got one more, and there's probably members who would readily answer a question piece to this comment. It appears to me that there's a lot of regional artists that are installing in the city of Missoula, and I can't help but wonder if we could tilt the odds in favor of either Missoula County, just actual citizens of Missoula, and then also to counter that, try to seek international art for the city of Missoula. So it's kind of running in both directions. I seem to notice there's a lot of regional representation.
And that just prompted to our continued conversation and priority to, you know, formalize and offer the opportunity for, you know, younger artists or artists who don't have the experience of working on public projects to be involved in the creation of large public works. So like a mentorship or apprenticeship programs that are kind of by the nature of it embedded into public art projects.
Cool. Anything else you want to get on today's list? Okay, I'm going to begin my kind of summary and my wind down of where we are if there's no further additions here. So going once, going twice, anything else to put on here? Okay, so obviously there's some work to do to go, boy, how do we take this list or things that were not thought of today and start to direct those into action. And even though the process I led you through today didn't get to the fun stuff or the creative stuff until the end, it came from having observed the committee over years and knowing, seeing it when it worked well, seeing it when it seemed to be more in idle without results. And I really believe that the attention to processes, how do we treat the institution? How do we treat an idea to manifest that into action and completion? I think by having that framework in place, we prepare for this list. We might decide now that we're thinking more routinely and more what's our playbook, how cool would it be, guys, to just have this thing called the idea bank, and it just lives in one of our Google Docs. And every meeting we pull the idea bank up, and for the last 10 minutes of every meeting, we just dump stuff onto the idea bank. And then we insert a few columns here that are how to take this to the next step. And most of these, it just takes a committee assignment and someone saying, you know what, I'm going to try to flesh that out a little more and get it to the level where it could go into our prioritization funnel. And then we may have a funnel that says it goes from bank into the funnel when we've learned that projects 1, 2, and 3, X, Y, Z, are all projects that have merit, and we'd love to see them all. And when we collectively take inventory of our collective time, resources, and fundraising ability, we're moving Y to the top, and X and Z, or whatever they are ranking priorities for next quarter or next year when we have this meeting. But if we capture the ideas, if we make these part of our routines, we have a bank, we have a funnel, we have a process in place where we can evaluate, and then when it gets down to the action, this is where we get into the discipline of subcommittee chair, action steps, and professional report back to the committee every time they come back. Professional feedback. And using these ideas that you came up with, but seeing them in these compartments and living with kind of a disciplined attending to these, I think would put the committee in a place that takes advantage of all of the gifts that you offered in the first 15 minutes of our meeting, and says, holy cow, when we take one of these ideas, vet them, and plug it into our engine, not only do we see these seeds flower, but we know that we're going to lose 3 committee members over the next 12 months or 18 months or 24 months, and 3 new are going to come in, and they're just going to be handed a baton because our continuity is established, how we just keep these pieces overlapping where it never feels like we're reinventing the wheel, but it feels like we're truly riding the wave of our institutional trajectory. I think we're in a position to do some really special things. I had a few notes written down of things that I just thought I'd leave you with as thoughts for you going forward. I think you'll notice from the what I prioritized today, that organization paves the way, and investing in our infrastructure will pay dividends. I think the discipline to the goal piece, here's a goal, and be very disciplined with its actionable steps and subcommittee chair responsibilities is invaluable. This overlaps a few things, how we use our staff, but the meticulous tracking of the commitments, the fundraising, the tasks is part of our actionable steps. And then as committee members, I'm so inspired by the first, I'm going to stop the share so I can see you once again. I was so inspired by the stories that I heard at the start of this meeting, and the realization that there's so many gifts on the committee, and then also the realizations that we're going to have better chemistries with some people on the committee than others. And some of us may lack the gifts of saying things perfectly or having the right organizational ideas, and the ability to allow for us to all have weaknesses and just embrace the committee, even though there are going to be those of us that we don't on a one-on-one basis necessarily have the ultimate chemistry, just really valuing that there is diversity and letting the committee process unfold. And I've seen it work. It does work. This is a super special committee that's making Missoula, when people come to Missoula and they're like, I love Missoula, we know that art is part of that equation. And everyone loves it. No one wants to do the work or dig in. So, Kathy, going forward, I'm going to put together a document that takes, here's how I think the work today is actionable. how today is the start of maybe just a difference in patterns or expectations of how meeting time is used and how we connect the dots, one meeting to another, and what we look at and keep track of. And if you want me back at a future juncture to pick up on kind of where we left off today, which is, God, we've got these ideas, but we didn't necessarily put them into a funnel. And how are we going to use the director compared to the chair and this and that? I'm happy to be involved if you see a place where I can be helpful of kind of paving or helping the group coalesce around next steps, or perhaps from today's list, that will just unfold naturally in committee meetings. I'm not offended either way. Just I'm always available to this committee if my processes can ever be helpful. With
That's
that,
wonderful.
is there
Thank you.
anyone who has parting questions or comments for me before I try to bring this down reasonably close to our finish point?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for agreeing to do this and working with us on this at the long range planning. And you probably will be asked back.
Okay.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Cool. Thanks.